I now have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Camara Jones. Dr. Jones is Senior Fellow of the Satcher Health Leadership Institute and Cardiovascular Research Institute of Morehouse School of Medicine. A family physician and epidemiologist, Dr. Jones is a public health leader who seeks to broaden the national debate to include not only universal access to quality healthcare, but also attention to the social determinants of health and equity. Her work focuses on naming, measuring, and addressing the impacts of racism on the health and well-being of the nation, and she is actively sought as a contributor to national efforts to eliminate health disparities and achieve health equity. Dr. Jones is the immediate past president of the American Public Health Association. She holds an adjunct professor appointment at the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University, and in 2019-2020 served as the fellow of the Harvard Radcliffe Institute. Prior to these appointments, Dr. Jones was an assistant professor at the Harvard School of Public Health before being recruited to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, where she served as a medical officer and research director on social determinants of health and equity. In the 1980s, she held a faculty appointment in the Community Health and Social Medicine Department at the Sophie Davis School. Dr. Jones is the recipient of numerous honors and has been elected to serve on many professional boards, including the Board of Directors of the DeKalb County Board of Health, the National Board of Public Health Examiners, the Executive Board of the American Public Health Association, the Board of Directors of the American College of Epidemiology, and the Board of Directors of the National Black Women's Health Project. Dr. Jones earned her BA in molecular biology from Wellesley College, her MD from the Stanford School of Medicine, and both a Master's of Public Health and a PhD in epidemiology from the Johns Hopkins School of Hygiene and Public Health. She completed residency training in general preventive medicine at Johns Hopkins and in family medicine at the residency program in social medicine at Montefiore Medical Center. It is our great fortune to have her as our keynote speaker. She embodies our mission and the leadership and advocacy that we expect of our graduates. Please welcome Dr. Jones back to the CUNY School of Medicine.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean Friedman. Thank you, President Boudreaux and Provost Tlisso. Thank you, Dean McGuff, and thank you, Senator Jackson. And graduates, this is a great, great, great day. And I thought that being virtual, you know, it would feel a little, that we would feel disconnected, but I honestly teared up at the processional of the faculty and then your processional in. And I feel like I wish I really, really knew you, but I feel like I know you a little bit. I know the spirit of the CUNY School of Medicine because back in 1986, so that's 35 years ago, before you were born, as Dean Friedman said, I was visiting assistant professor there for a year. So I know the spirit of the people who came way before you. And I even know a few of the people that you know, because just 4 years ago, I was the final class day speaker for the last graduating class from the Sophie Davis Biomedical Education Program. So those folks were the third years when you came in. So we're a little connected, but I feel very connected to you. And the first thing I know is that I want to join in everybody who is celebrating your amazing achievements and your amazing future. This has been a hard year, right? It's been a hard 7 years for you guys. It's been hard, you know, centuries in this country. But in particular, it's been a year marked by the pandemic, by actually an awakening to the racism in this society, by the attack on the Capitol. And this is a great year for you all to be emerging as healthcare providers, as healthcare leaders, and as social justice warriors. So what I want to do right now is share two things with you and with your families. The first is a story, and it's a story for you to share. It's not a story to educate you, because I'm sure that you already know these things, but in my own work on naming, measuring, and addressing the impacts of racism on the health and well-being of the nation, I have developed many allegories, teaching stories, to communicate the 4 key messages that I think we need to have when we're talking about racism in this nation. The first of those key messages is that racism exists. Yes, it does, because many people are in staunch denial that racism exists, or if it did, that it still exists, and staunch denial that it is a profoundly negative impact on the health and well-being of the nation. But the second of the 4 key messages, racism exists. The second is that racism is a system. The third is that racism saps the strengths of the whole society. And the fourth is that, yes, we can act to dismantle racism. So I'm going to tell you a story that illustrates that racism exists. And then I'm going to share with you a charge as you go forth in your careers, whatever you end up doing. 40 years ago, when I graduated from medical school, I never would have known that I'd be about this, the work that I'm doing. But whatever you find yourself, whatever career you forge for yourself, these are 4 charges for you to live by. The story first. This story I call Dual Reality, a restaurant saga. And as I said, the moral of this story, so spoiler alert, is that racism exists. And the story was actually stimulated by an experience I had as a first-year medical student. So come walk with me, get in my shoes here. Here I am, a first-year medical student, very studious. First-year medical student, very studious. One Saturday, wake up, hit the books early, and I'm in the books. It's, mid-afternoon, some friends come over. And do they distract me from my studies? Oh, no. All of us get together and we start studying long and hard. And now it's getting late and we're getting hungry. And I am first-year medical student. And some friends come over, we all get to studying long and hard, and now it's getting late and we're getting hungry, and I have no food in the apartment, which is so typical that my friends excused me. They said, never mind, Camara, but we're hungry. So, let's go into town and find something to eat. So we do, we walk into town and we find a restaurant and we walk in and we sit down and the menus are presented and we order our food and the food is served. And so here we are eating, and nothing remarkable, maybe not the story you thought I was going to tell about racism and a restaurant, because the name of this story is Dual Reality, a restaurant saga. But hold on, as I sat there with my friends eating, I looked across the room and I noticed a sign that was a startling revelation to me about racism. And so now maybe I'm going to make you a little curious, and you're going to say, well, Dr. Jones, what did the sign say? Well, what did the sign say? The sign said, open. Now, maybe I've lost some of you at this point, because you're like, why is open a startling revelation to me about racism? Well, let me recap. Here we are, sitting inside a restaurant eating. I look up, I see a sign that says open, thinking no more about it. I would assume that other people could walk in, sit down, order their food and eat. But because I knew something about the two-sided nature of those signs, I recognized that indeed now the restaurant was closed due to the hour, but firmly closed, and that other hungry people just a few feet away from me, but on the other side of that sign, would not be able to come in, sit down, order their food and eat. And that's when I recognized that racism structures and open, closed signs in our society, that racism structures, if you will, a dual reality. And for those who are sitting inside the restaurant at the table of opportunity eating, and they look up and they see a sign that says open, they don't even recognize that there's a two-sided sign going on, because it's difficult for any of us to recognize a system of inequity that privileges us. So, for example, it is difficult for men to recognize male privilege and sexism. It's difficult for white Americans to recognize white privilege and racism. It's actually difficult for all Americans to recognize our American privilege in the global context, although we are living that right now these days because of how the United States is sequestering, if you will, so much of the global supply of vaccine, even as we speak. But those on the outside are very well aware that there's a two-sided sign going on, because the sign proclaims closed to them, but they can look through the window and see people inside eating. So back inside the restaurant, To those who ask, is there really a two-sided sign going on? Does racism really exist? I say, I know it's hard for you to know when you only see open. In fact, that's part of your privilege, not to have to know. But once you do know, you can choose to act. So it's not a scary thing to name racism. It's actually an empowering thing to name racism. It doesn't compel you to act, but it does equip you to act so that if you care about those on the other side of the sign, which is an if, but if you do, why, you could even talk to the restaurant owner who is inside with you, and you could say, restaurant owner, there are hungry people outside. Why don't you open the door and let them come in? You'll make more money, and oh, the conversations we could have. Or if you're sitting up inside that restaurant and you want to do something, well, maybe you could pass food through the window. Or maybe you could tear down the sign or try to break through the door. But at least what you won't be doing is sitting back saying, wonder why those people don't just come on in and sit down and eat, because you'll understand something about the two-sided nature of that sign. So when I have just 4 or 5 minutes to convey to a group of people, not us gathered today, but this is a tool for you to convey to those people that you will encounter as you go forth in this world, but to convey to a group of people that yes, racism exists, that it's structuring a two-sided or multi-sided sign. It's creating a dual or multifaceted reality. This is the story I tell. And actually, I want to let you know that I have started a 3-hour conversation on 2 different occasions, 3 hours, by asking the following question. How could people who are born inside the restaurant know something about the two-sided nature of that sign? And each time it was a 3-hour conversation, because there are many ways to know. What I am heartened by these days is that there are more people who are born inside the restaurant who have a sense now that there's a two-sided sign going on. There are more people who are born inside the restaurant who just 1 year ago would have been sitting up inside the restaurant and then cocking their heads and saying, what are those people outside saying? Black lives matter? Don't they know all lives matter? Who are now affirming, yes, Black lives matter. More people who were born inside the restaurant are now saying the word racism, now putting together the words structural racism or systemic racism. This is important. But I have to warn us that, yes, it is important for us to name racism because you must name a problem in order to address that problem. But just saying the words racism or structural racism, systemic racism, just putting out a statement on your webpage or tweeting something or putting something on Facebook, that's great. But if we just name racism, if we just say a thing, then 6 months from now, we as a nation are at risk of forgetting why we said that thing, because racism denial is so staunchly held in this society, and it is so seductive that we might find ourselves falling back into what I describe as the sleepiness, the somnolence of racism denial. So we have to go beyond saying a thing to action. We need to tear down the sign. And of course, racism is not just a sign, it's the sign, it's the door, it's the lock, it's a whole system going on. We have to dismantle the lock, take the door off the hinges, because once we start acting, we will not forget why we are acting. So that is that story I give you not to instruct you, because most of us in this room understand this thing very well, that racism is creating a dual reality, that those on the inside have no idea unless they venture out, right? And we're so sequestered in our little segregated settings, in our bubbles of experience. People have no idea of the greatness of the humanity, but the constraint of the opportunity just on the other side of the door or the sign or the other side of town. So I give you this story and hope that you will remember it. I'd love for you all to discuss it with your family and friends, but hold it as a tool in your toolbox too, as you go forward and you encounter people who will say right up in your face that racism doesn't exist. Now, to your charge as emerging healthcare providers, healthcare leaders, and social justice warriors. I call this charge my 4 BCs. And the charge is be courageous, be curious, be collective, and build community. So when I say be courageous, I first of all mean be unafraid of controversy, right? Don't be timid. And I also mean embrace challenge. When somebody offers you an opportunity, for example, to be the chief resident, to speak before this group of faculty, or to speak before this community group, or to do anything, not to do drugs or not to jump off a cliff, but if somebody offers you something and it makes you feel a little bit nervous and you're not sure, you're like, oh, should I do it? Say yes. Say yes. Embrace challenge. Embrace challenge, because the person who's offered you that opportunity already knows that you will be successful in doing that thing. And when you say yes and you do the thing and you are successful, you will learn more about your ability. You will grow in your confidence and in your knowledge of self. So embrace challenge. This is all part of being courageous. Being courageous means being open to discomfort, because I have come to recognize that for all of us, the edge of our comfort is our growing edge. Be a truth teller, and not only be a truth teller, live your truth. Follow your passions and live your truth. So that's all under be courageous. The second of the 4 BCs, to be curious, is to ask why, right? And then ask why again, and why again, and ask what I call serial whys. Don't be satisfied in the clinical setting or in life or in society with the superficial answers. Keep asking these serial whys so that you could go from glib or superficial or individually focused explanations to arrive at understanding root causes, both in the patient's presentation, but also in where we are in this nation. When I say be curious, I mean read widely, read history, stay woke, pay attention to current events, both locally and globally, and learn more languages and travel widely, both locally and globally. So be courageous, be curious. The third of the BCs is to be collective. So when I say that, I mean care about the whole. Be a citizen, but not in a narrow US citizen, national citizen role. Be a global citizen. Be interested in the stories of others. Believe the stories of others, not just of your patients, but of people around the world, and believe the stories of others without requiring, for example, cell phone video documentation or even, body cam footage. But after you're interested and believe in the stories of others, join in the stories of others. Be collective by lending your voice, your energy, your insights, and your resources to the world around you. Do not fall into this narrow focus on the individual that characterizes US society. Realize that we are all in this together, and recognize that collective action not only propels us and inspires us, it protects us, it informs us. So when you think about your power, don't think, what can I do? Think about, what can we do? And understand the power of collective action. So I have said, be courageous, be curious, be collective. Now the fourth one is build community. Go across town and stay a while. Seek out opportunities to burst through your bubble of experience, to experience the truth of our common humanity in different settings. The truth that just across town, there are people who are just as kind, just as funny, just as generous, just as hardworking, just as smart as we are, who are living in completely different circumstances. Because when we understand our common humanity by bursting through those bubbles, we start building common cause. Talk to strangers, and as physicians, that is what we do all the time. But even not in the clinical setting, but talk to strangers when we get back to being on buses or on airplanes or sitting in the park. Actively look for evidence of two-sided signs. When I wish you could have seen my hands and how I described in that story, that dual reality or restaurant saga story about the two-sided signs, but actively ask the question, is there something differential going on here by race, by immigration status, by gender, by language, by zip code, by urban, rural, by religion, by all of the things that our society has used to divide us one from the other. And when we're asking, is there something differential going on here by any of these axes of inequity? Don't only look at outcomes, health conditions, but look at opportunities, investment, the quality of the schools and the housing and the like. we cannot be complacent and say, well, it looks open to me. We have to develop a sensitivity to detecting the absence of who is not at this decision-making table where I am so happy to find myself. Who is, what is not on the agenda that I need to put on the agenda for this faculty meeting or this residency program? What policies are not in place that, if put in place, could lead to a much fairer society? And the final thing under build community is to reveal inaction in the face of need. Reveal lack of action in the face of need, because that is how structural racism very often shows up these days. So I have given you a story that I hope you can remember, this dual reality restaurant saga, about the two-sided sign. I have given you 4 charges: to be courageous, to be curious, to be collective, and to build community. And so I just want to close by celebrating you. I want to join in celebrating you. You have done an amazing thing over these past 7 years, and congratulations today. Your faculty is celebrating you. Your family and friends are celebrating you. It is legitimate for you to go forth right now to be a social justice warrior, because social justice warrioring is a legitimate medical intervention. The world needs you. I want you to know your power. I want you to live your power. I want you to go forth and matter. Thank you and congratulations.